Welcome back to another episode. I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before we start I thought it would be fun if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Right, get comfy and relax and let's begin. I rented a secluded cabin in the mountains for a solo writing retreat. It seemed like the perfect getaway, just me, my thoughts, and the peaceful solitude of nature. But one night, as I sat at my desk, typing away on my laptop, I heard noises outside. At first, I dismissed them as just the sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the creaking of branches in the wind. But then I heard voices, low, guttural whispers that sent a shiver down my spine. I peered out the window and saw two men lurking in the darkness, their figures illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them approach the cabin, their movements stealthy and deliberate. They were armed. I could see the glint of metal in their hands, the cold steel of their weapons reflecting the moonlight. Panic seized me as I realized that I was in danger, that these men were not here by accident, they were here for a reason. And it wasn't to ask for directions or borrow a cup of sugar. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to survive. With trembling hands, I grabbed a nearby lamp and switched it off, plunging the cabin into darkness. I crouched behind the sofa, trying to control my breathing as I listened to the sounds of the men outside. They were getting closer, their footsteps growing louder with each passing moment. I prayed silently for them to go away, to leave me alone and let me live to see another day. But deep down, I knew that they wouldn't stop until they found me, until they had what they came for. And then, suddenly, the door burst open with a loud crash, and the men stormed into the cabin. I pressed myself further into the shadows, holding my breath as they searched the room. My heart raced as they moved closer, their footsteps echoing off the walls of the cabin. I could hear them talking in low, hushed tones, their voices filled with menace and malice. I closed my eyes and prayed for a miracle, for some way out of this nightmare. But when I opened them again, the men were standing right in front of me, their faces twisted into sinister grins. I braced myself for the worst, but to my surprise, they didn't attack me. Instead, they seemed almost amused by my fear, as if they were toying with me, playing a cruel game of cat and mouse. I knew I had to do something, anything, to escape. With a surge of adrenaline, I leaped to my feet and dashed for the door, ignoring the shouts of the men behind me. I ran blindly through the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled over rocks and roots. I could hear the men chasing after me, their voices growing louder with each passing moment. But I refused to give up, refused to let them catch me. I pushed myself harder, running faster than I ever had before, driven by pure instinct and the desperate desire to survive. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I saw a glimmer of light ahead, the glow of a distant street lamp, shining like a beacon in the night. With renewed determination, I sprinted toward it, my legs burning with exertion as I raced towards safety. And finally, mercifully, I broke free of the darkness and emerged into the open air, gasping for breath as I collapsed onto the pavement. I looked around wildly, expecting to see the men closing in on me. But to my relief, they were nowhere to be seen. They had vanished into the night, leaving me alone and shaken but alive. I stumbled to my feet and staggered toward the nearest house, praying that whoever lived there would take pity on me and offer me shelter from the horrors I had just endured. And as I knocked on the door, my heart still pounding in my chest, I knew that I would never forget the terror of that night, the night when I came face to face with pure evil and lived to tell the tale. Taking my family to a cozy cabin in the snowy woods for a winter vacation. It seemed like the perfect getaway, just us, surrounded by the peace and quiet of nature, away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But as the blizzard raged outside, the atmosphere inside the cabin grew tense. The wind howled through the trees, and the snow piled up against the windows, blocking out the world beyond. We were trapped, cut off from the outside world by the relentless storm. At first, we tried to make the best of it, huddling together by the fireplace and playing board games to pass the time. But as the hours stretched into days, a sense of unease began to settle over us, like a dark cloud looming on the horizon. It started with small things, strange noises in the night, footsteps echoing through the empty rooms, and the feeling of being watched from the shadows. At first, we brushed it off as our imaginations running wild in the isolation of the cabin. But then things took a sinister turn. Objects would go missing, only to reappear in strange places days later. And there were signs that someone had been inside the cabin while we slept, footprints in the snow outside our window, and the faint smell of cigarette smoke lingering in the air. We tried to convince ourselves that it was just a coincidence, that there was a rational explanation for everything that was happening. But deep down, we knew that something was very wrong, that we were not alone in the cabin, and that whatever was out there was watching us, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the days passed and the storm showed no signs of letting up, our sense of unease only grew stronger. We started to hear voices outside the cabin at night, whispering in the darkness and sending shivers down our spines. And then, one night, we saw them, two figures lurking in the shadows just beyond the edge of the forest. They were watching us, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, and we knew in an instant that they were not there with good intentions. We huddled together in fear, unsure of what to do next. We were trapped in the cabin, with no way to call for help and no means of escape. All we could do was wait and hope that help would come before it was too late. But help never came. The storm raged on outside, trapping us in its icy grip, while the sinister figures outside the cabin grew bolder with each passing day. They would bang on the windows and doors, taunting us with their presence, and we knew that we were running out of time. In a desperate bid for survival, we decided to confront them ourselves. We armed ourselves with whatever we could find, kitchen knives, fireplace pokers, anything that could be used as a weapon, and prepared to defend ourselves against whatever lay outside. When we finally mustered the courage to open the door and step outside, we were met with a chilling sight, the two figures standing before us, their faces twisted into malicious grins. They were locals, we realized, people who knew the area and had likely been watching us since we arrived at the cabin. But their intentions were far from friendly. They lunged at us with wild abandon, wielding knives and shouting threats as they closed in on us. We fought back with all our strength, desperate to protect ourselves and our loved ones from harm. In the end, it was a close call. We emerged from the ordeal and lived to experience another day. We headed out to a secluded hunting cabin deep in the Canadian wilderness for a weekend of hunting. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, just me and my friends enjoying the great outdoors and bonding over our shared love of hunting. But things took a terrifying turn when we accidentally shot what we thought was a bear. We didn't realize our mistake until we approached the fallen animal and saw that it wasn't a bear at all. It was a man, a deranged hermit who had been living off the grid for years. We were horrified by what we had done, but before we could react, the man sprang to his feet and lunged at us with a wild, animalistic rage. We stumbled backward, our hearts pounding in our chests as we tried to make sense of what was happening. The hermit was like nothing I had ever seen before. His eyes were wild and unfocused, his clothes tattered and filthy. He looked like he hadn't seen civilization in years, like he had been living in the wilderness for so long that he had become one with it. We tried to reason with him, to explain that it was an accident, that we hadn't meant to shoot him. But he didn't seem to hear us. He just kept coming at us, his fists clenched and his teeth bared in a feral snarl. We knew we had to get out of there, to escape before the hermit could do us any harm. We turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush as we made our way back to the cabin. But the hermit was hot on our heels, his footsteps echoing through the forest as he pursued us with single-minded determination. We could hear him shouting behind us, his voice filled with rage and madness. We reached the safety of the cabin and slammed the door shut behind us, panting for breath as we tried to catch our bearings. But we knew we weren't safe, not with the hermit out there, hunting us like animals. We barricaded the door as best we could, piling furniture against it in a desperate attempt to keep the hermit out. But deep down, we knew it was only a matter of time before he found a way in. We huddled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the forest outside as we waited for the inevitable. Hours passed, but the hermit didn't relent. He continued to prowl around the cabin, searching for a way in. And then, just when we thought we couldn't take it anymore, we heard a sound that made our blood run cold, the sound of breaking glass, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps on the wooden floor. The hermit had found a way in, and now he was inside the cabin with us, his presence looming over us like a dark shadow. We were trapped, with nowhere to run and no way to escape. But we refused to give up without a fight. We armed ourselves with whatever makeshift weapons we could find, kitchen knives, fireplace pokers, anything that could be used to defend ourselves against the deranged hermit. We waited in tense silence, our hearts pounding in our chests as we listened for any sign of the hermit's approach. And then, suddenly, he burst into the room, his eyes blazing with madness as he lunged at us with a savage roar. We fought back with everything we had, driving him back with our makeshift weapons as we struggled to stay alive. It was a brutal, bloody battle, but in the end, we emerged victorious. The hermit lay dead at our feet, his lifeless eyes staring up at us in silent accusation. Exhausted and shaken, we emerged from the cabin and made our way back to civilization, our minds reeling from the horrors we had witnessed. But as we left the wilderness behind us, we knew that we would never forget the terror of that weekend. I went on this trip to a cabin by a lake, just to get away from everything for a bit. It was supposed to be peaceful, just me and nature. But things got weird real fast. The first few days were fine. I'd wake up early, make some coffee, and sit by the lake, watching the sun rise. It was so quiet and peaceful, just the sound of birds chirping and the water lapping against the shore. But then, things started to change. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. It was like a flash of light, quick and fleeting. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then it happened again and again. It was like someone was taking pictures, but I was all alone. I tried to shake it off and go to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next day, I decided to go for a hike to clear my head. But as I was walking through the woods, I kept getting this creepy feeling like I was being watched. When I got back to the cabin, I started looking around, trying to figure out what was going on. That's when I found them, hidden cameras, tucked away in the corners of the room, staring back at me with their tiny, unblinking eyes. I felt sick to my stomach, like someone had been spying on me the whole time. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? Should I pack up and leave? But then, I heard something outside, footsteps, crunching through the leaves. My heart started racing as I realized that whoever was watching me might still be out there, lurking in the shadows. I grabbed a kitchen knife, the only weapon I had, and crept towards the door, trying to stay quiet. I peered through the window, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. Then, suddenly, there was a knock at the door, slow and deliberate. I froze, my hand tightening around the knife. Who could it be? Was it the person who had been watching me? I didn't want to find out. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest, praying that whoever it was would just go away. But they didn't. The knocking grew louder and more insistent, echoing through the cabin like a drumbeat. I knew I had to do something, so I mustered up all the courage I had and shouted, "Who's there?" There was no response, just silence. I waited, holding my breath, but the knocking didn't stop. It just kept going, getting louder and more frantic with each passing second. I felt like I was going to lose my mind. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I swung open the door, ready to confront whoever was on the other side. But there was no one there, just the empty darkness of the night. I stood there for a moment, staring out into the void, feeling more alone and vulnerable than ever. And then, slowly, the realization dawned on me. Whoever had been watching me, whoever had been knocking at my door, they were still out there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my things and ran out of the cabin, not stopping until I reached the safety of my car. I drove away as fast as I could, my heart still pounding in my chest, the fear and paranoia gnawing at my mind. I don't know who was watching me or why, but I do know one thing: I'll never go back to that cabin again. I rented a secluded cabin in the woods to find inspiration for my art. It was the perfect setting, surrounded by nature, with nothing but the sound of birdsong and the rustle of leaves to keep me company. I spent long hours painting alone, lost in my own world as I tried to capture the beauty of the forest on canvas. But one day, as I peered out of the window, my gaze fell upon the cabin across the lake. At first, I didn't think much of it, just another secluded retreat like mine. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a man standing outside the cabin, dragging what looked like a heavy sack across the ground. He moved with purpose, his movements deliberate and controlled. And then, to my horror, I saw him dump the sack into the lake, the water splashing up around him as he disappeared into the trees. I felt a surge of fear and revulsion wash over me as I realized what I had just witnessed. It was clear that something terrible had happened, something that I couldn't ignore. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and hurried out of the cabin, determined to find out what was going on. I made my way down to the lake, my heart pounding in my chest as I scanned the water for any sign of the sack. And then I saw it, a dark shape bobbing in the water, just below the surface. Without hesitation, I waded into the lake, my clothes soaking wet as I reached out and pulled the sack toward me. As I opened it, a wave of horror washed over me. Inside the sack was the body of a woman, her eyes white with terror and her skin pale and lifeless. It was clear that she had been murdered, her body dumped unceremoniously in the lake like a piece of garbage. I felt sick to my stomach as I looked down at her lifeless form, the reality of what I had stumbled upon sinking in. But I knew I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I had to act, to bring whoever had done this to justice. I called the police and reported what I had seen, my voice trembling as I recounted the grisly details of the crime. They arrived soon after, their faces grim as they surveyed the scene before them. It wasn't long before they had the man in custody, his hands bound behind his back as they led him away. He didn't say a word as they questioned him, his eyes filled with a cold, empty stare. It was a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in the hearts of men, a reminder that evil can exist even in the most idyllic of settings. But thanks to my quick thinking and bravery, justice had been served, and the victim could finally rest in peace. As I watched the police car disappear into the distance, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It had been a terrifying experience, but I knew that I had done the right thing. The cabin we rented seemed idyllic at first glance, nestled among towering trees and surrounded by the gentle murmur of a nearby stream. But as the days passed, an unsettling feeling began to gnaw at the edges of our consciousness, like a shadow creeping in from the periphery. It started with small things, creaking floorboards in the dead of night, whispers carried on the wind that seemed to echo through the walls of the cabin. At first, we brushed it off as the natural sounds of the forest, the quirks of an old building settling into its surroundings. But then we stumbled upon it, a hidden room tucked away in the depths of the cabin, concealed behind a false wall in the basement. It was like something out of a nightmare, a chamber of horrors filled with ancient torture devices that seemed to leer at us with malicious intent. The sight sent a chill down our spines, and we knew in an instant that we were not alone in the cabin. Someone, or something, had been here before us, leaving behind a legacy of pain and suffering that lingered in the air like a foul stench. We tried to rationalize it, to convince ourselves that it was just a cruel prank or a morbid curiosity left behind by a previous tenant. But deep down, we knew that there was something more sinister at play, something that defied explanation and threatened to consume us in its dark embrace. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly oppressive, like a weight pressing down on our chests and suffocating the air around us. We tried to carry on as normal, to enjoy our vacation despite the lurking sense of dread that hung over us like a storm cloud. But it was impossible to ignore the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were following our every move from the shadows. We would wake in the middle of the night to find the door to the hidden room standing open, the darkness within beckoning us with twisted fingers. And then, one night, we heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the cabin, slow and deliberate, like the approach of some unseen predator. We froze in terror, listening as the footsteps drew closer and closer, until they were right outside our door. With trembling hands, we mustered the courage to investigate, creeping through the silent darkness of the cabin in search of the source of the sound. And there, in the dim glow of a flickering candle, we saw it, a figure standing in the doorway to the hidden room, bathed in the eerie light like a specter from the past. We tried to scream, to flee from the nightmare unfolding before us, but our voices caught in our throats, choked off by fear and disbelief. The figure turned to face us, its features shrouded in darkness, and we knew in an instant that we were staring into the face of pure evil. In a panic, we scrambled for the door, desperate to escape the horror of the hidden room and the malevolent presence that lurked within. But as we reached for the handle, the figure lunged forward, grabbing hold of us with icy fingers that burned like fire against our skin. We fought back with all our strength, clawing and scratching at our assailant in a desperate bid for survival. And then, with a final burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, we broke free from its grasp and stumbled into the night, gasping for breath and shaking with terror. We ran through the forest, guided only by the dim light of the moon and the pounding of our hearts in our ears. Behind us, we could hear the sound of pursuit, the footsteps of our attacker echoing through the trees like a macabre symphony of death. But we refused to give up, to surrender to the darkness that threatened to consume us whole. With every ounce of strength we had left, we pushed ourselves onward, determined to escape the nightmare that had descended upon us. And then, just when we thought all hope was lost, we saw it, the faint glow of civilization on the horizon, the promise of safety and sanctuary in a world gone mad. With renewed determination, we pressed on, our fear giving way to a desperate need to survive. And finally, after what felt like an eternity of running, we stumbled out of the forest and into the welcoming embrace of the outside world. We collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath and shaking with exhaustion, but alive and free from the horror that had threatened to consume us. As we looked back at the cabin in the distance, we knew that we would never forget the terror we had endured within its walls. I surprised my partner with a romantic weekend getaway to a secluded cabin in the Smoky Mountains. The drive up was picturesque, with winding roads and lush greenery all around us. We were both excited to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and spend some quality time together in nature. As we arrived at the cabin, nestled deep in the woods, we were both struck by its beauty. It was the perfect retreat, cozy and rustic, with a crackling fireplace and a breathtaking view of the mountains. We settled in quickly, eager to unwind and enjoy our time together. But as night fell, things took a sinister turn. We began to hear strange noises coming from the surrounding woods, rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and eerie whispers that seemed to echo through the darkness. At first, we tried to brush it off as the sounds of the forest, but as the noises grew louder and more persistent, we couldn't ignore them any longer. With a sense of unease creeping over us, we decided to investigate. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, we ventured out into the woods, our hearts pounding in our chests as we followed the source of the noises. And then, we saw them, a group of people wearing ski masks, huddled together in a clearing deep in the woods. They were whispering to each other in hushed tones, their voices low and urgent. We froze in our tracks, unsure of what to do. Were these people dangerous? Were they hiding something sinister in the woods? We didn't want to stick around to find out. Quietly, we began to retreat, careful not to alert the strangers to our presence. But as we turned to leave, a twig snapped loudly underfoot, echoing through the silent forest like a gunshot. The masked figures whipped around, their eyes locking onto us with a predatory gleam. In an instant, they were on the move, charging toward us with terrifying speed and precision. Panic surged through my veins as we turned and ran, our footsteps pounding against the forest floor as we raced back to the safety of the cabin. But no matter how fast we ran, it felt like the masked figures were gaining on us with every passing moment. We burst through the door of the cabin, breathless and shaking with fear. Quickly, we bolted the door behind us, hoping to keep whatever was out there at bay. But the noises outside only grew louder, more insistent. It was clear that the masked figures were not going to give up easily. They wanted something, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I realized that we were trapped. There was no way out, no way to escape the terrifying reality of what was happening outside our door. We huddled together in the dimly lit cabin, listening to the sounds of the masked figures prowling just beyond the walls. Hours passed like this, the tension in the air thick and suffocating. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noises stopped. The forest fell silent once more, as if nothing had ever happened. But we knew better. We knew that the masked figures were still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too terrified to sleep. And when morning finally came, we wasted no time in packing our things and fleeing the cabin, desperate to put as much distance between us and the masked figures as possible. As we drove away, the image of those sinister figures burned into my mind, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurk just beyond the safety of civilization. I rented this remote cabin in the Pacific Northwest to focus on my novel. It was the perfect place to escape the distractions of everyday life and immerse myself in my writing. Nestled deep in the woods, surrounded by towering trees and the soothing sounds of nature, it seemed like the ideal setting to unleash my creativity. As I settled into the cabin, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation. I couldn't wait to dive into my work and see where it would take me. But as the days passed and I delved deeper into my story, strange things began to happen. It started with small things, odd noises in the middle of the night, like footsteps outside my window, and the feeling of being watched when I was alone in the cabin. At first, I tried to brush it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but the sense of unease only grew stronger with each passing day. And then, one afternoon, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I was miles away from civilization, after all, so I hesitated before answering. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the door to find an elderly couple standing on the porch. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their faces weathered and lined with age. Something about them sent a shiver down my spine, but I tried to remain polite as they introduced themselves as the caretakers of the cabin. They claimed to have been living in the area for years, tending to the cabins and keeping an eye on things for the owners. But there was something off about them, something unsettling that I couldn't quite put my finger on. As they spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something from me. Their eyes darted nervously around the cabin, and their smiles seemed forced, almost predatory. I tried to brush off my unease and engage in polite conversation, but the longer they stayed, the more uncomfortable I became. There was an underlying tension in the air, like a storm brewing on the horizon. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the couple announced that they had to leave. They bid me farewell with strange, knowing smiles, leaving me alone once again in the quiet solitude of the cabin. But their visit had left me shaken, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I tried to focus on my writing, but my mind kept wandering back to the strange encounter and the unsettling feeling that lingered in its wake. As night fell, the sounds of the forest seemed to grow louder, more ominous. Every rustle of leaves and creak of branches sounded like a threat, and I found myself jumping at the slightest noise. And then, just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard it, the sound of footsteps outside my window, slow and deliberate, as if someone were pacing back and forth in the darkness. My heart pounding in my chest, I lay frozen in bed, listening intently as the footsteps drew closer and closer. And then, suddenly, they stopped, right outside my window. I held my breath, waiting for something to happen, but the night remained eerily silent. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted off into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, I awoke to find no sign of the elderly couple or anyone else outside my window. But the sense of unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind like a persistent itch. I knew I couldn't stay in the cabin any longer. Whatever was happening here, I wanted no part of it. With trembling hands, I packed up my things and made plans to leave as soon as possible. As I drove away from the cabin, a sense of relief washed over me. I was grateful to be leaving that place behind, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something truly sinister. And as I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, I saw something that made my blood run cold, the elderly couple, standing at the edge of the forest, watching me go with those same strange, knowing smiles plastered on their faces. We were Jack's extended family, gathering at our ancestral cabin in the woods for what was supposed to be a joyous reunion. The cabin, nestled among the tall trees and surrounded by the tranquil beauty of nature, held decades of memories and stories passed down through generations. But as the days passed and old family secrets began to resurface, the atmosphere in the cabin grew tense, like a storm gathering on the horizon. It started with small disagreements, a heated argument over who would sleep in which room, a clash of personalities that threatened to tear us apart at the seams. But as the tension mounted, so too did the sense of unease that hung over us like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over what should have been a time of celebration. And then, one night, things took a sinister turn. We heard strange noises coming from the woods surrounding the cabin, rustling in the underbrush, the snap of twigs underfoot, the distant sound of whispers carried on the wind. At first, we dismissed it as the natural sounds of the forest, the nocturnal activities of the creatures that called the woods their home. But as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more insistent, like an unseen force drawing ever closer to the cabin. We huddled together in fear, listening to the eerie symphony of the night, our hearts pounding in our chests as we waited for whatever was out there to reveal itself. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noises stopped. The forest fell silent once more, the only sound the pounding of our hearts in our ears. We waited with bated breath, unsure of what to expect next, but nothing came. In the days that followed, we tried to carry on as normal, to put the strange events of that night behind us and focus on enjoying our time together as a family. But the sense of unease lingered, like a shadow that refused to be dispelled by the light of day. And then, one evening, as we sat around the fire recounting old family stories, we heard it, the sound of footsteps approaching the cabin, slow and deliberate, like the footsteps of someone with a purpose. We froze in fear, our eyes darting to the door, waiting for it to burst open and reveal the source of the noise. But nothing happened. The footsteps drew closer and closer, until they were right outside the door, and then they stopped. We held our breath, waiting for whatever was out there to make its move, but there was only silence. And then, without warning, the door burst open, and a figure stepped into the cabin, shrouded in darkness. We screamed in terror, scrambling to our feet and backing away from the intruder, but it was no use. The figure advanced on us, its features obscured by the shadows, until it was standing right in front of us, its eyes gleaming with malice. And then, in a voice that sent shivers down our spines, it spoke, a voice filled with venom and hatred, a voice that seemed to echo through the very walls of the cabin. "You're not welcome here," it said, its words dripping with menace. "This is our cabin, and you have no right to be here." We tried to reason with it, to explain that we were just here for a family reunion, but it was no use. The intruder was determined to keep us from leaving, to drive us out of the cabin and back into the night. And so, with no other options left to us, we did the only thing we could: we fought back. We fought with all our strength, using whatever makeshift weapons we could find to defend ourselves against the intruder. And in the end, after what felt like an eternity of struggle, we emerged victorious. The intruder fled into the night, defeated but not defeated, leaving us shaken but alive. As we stood there in the aftermath of the ordeal, the realization slowly dawned on us: the cabin was no longer a place of refuge and sanctuary, but a battleground where old family secrets and tensions had boiled over into violence. But despite everything we had endured, we refused to be driven out by fear. We stood together as a family, united in our determination to reclaim what was rightfully ours, and we vowed to never let the darkness of the woods consume us again. It all started innocently enough. Tilly, and me and my classmates signed up for what seemed like an exciting adventure, a wilderness survival challenge in a remote cabin, far away from the comforts of modern life. We were eager to test our limits, to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones and discover what we were truly capable of. As we arrived at the cabin, nestled deep in the heart of the wilderness, excitement buzzed in the air. We were ready for a week of roughing it, of learning to fend for ourselves in the untamed wilderness that stretched out before us. But as the days passed, the reality of our situation began to sink in. Life in the wilderness was far from easy, and the challenges we faced were more daunting than we could have ever imagined. We struggled to find food and water, to build shelter and start fires with nothing but the most basic of tools at our disposal. And then, one by one, strange things began to happen. Supplies went missing, footsteps echoed through the night, and eerie sounds drifted through the trees like whispers on the wind. We tried to brush it off as our imaginations running wild, the natural sounds of the forest playing tricks on our minds. But deep down, we knew that something was wrong. There was a sense of unease that hung over us like a dark cloud, a feeling that we were being watched by unseen eyes from the shadows. And then, on the third night, it happened. One of our classmates disappeared without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a trail of footprints leading into the darkness of the forest. We searched frantically for any sign of them, calling out their name into the night, but they were gone, swallowed up by the vast expanse of the wilderness. Panic set in as we realized that we were not alone out here, that something was hunting us in the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We huddled together in the cabin, clutching our makeshift weapons and listening to the sounds of the night, praying for the first light of dawn to break through the trees and banish the darkness. But even as the sun rose on the horizon, the sense of dread that had settled over us refused to dissipate. We knew that we were in danger, that whatever lurked in the shadows was still out there, waiting for us to let our guard down so it could claim its next victim. Days turned into nights, and still, the disappearances continued. Each morning brought with it a new sense of terror as we counted the dwindling numbers of our group, wondering who would be next to vanish into the depths of the forest. And then, just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, we found it the source of our nightmares lurking in the darkness just beyond the edge of the clearing. It was a figure cloaked in shadow, its eyes gleaming with malice as it watched us from the safety of the trees. We knew then that we had to act fast if we wanted to survive. With hearts pounding and hands shaking, we made a plan to confront our unseen adversary and put an end to the terror that had plagued us for days. Armed with nothing but our courage and determination, we ventured out into the forest, following the trail of disappearances to its source. The air was thick with tension as we moved through the trees, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sending shivers down our spines. And then, suddenly, we saw it, the creature that had been stalking us from the shadows, its twisted form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. There was no time to hesitate as we launched ourselves at the creature, fighting tooth and nail to protect ourselves and each other from its deadly grasp. The battle was fierce and unforgiving, but in the end, we emerged victorious. The creature lay defeated at our feet, its dark presence banished from the forest once and for all. As we stood there, catching our breath and surveying the scene before us, a sense of relief washed over us like a wave. We had faced our fears head-on and come out on top, stronger and more resilient than we had ever thought possible. And as we made our way back to the cabin, the first rays of dawn breaking through the trees, we knew that we had survived the ultimate test of our strength and courage. So, me and my buds, we decided to rent this cabin by this lake, you know? Figured it'd be a chill weekend, just fishing, cracking open some cold ones, the usual. We were stoked to get away from the city for a bit, breathe in some fresh air, all that jazz. First day was great, man. We're out on the lake, lines in the water, just shooting the breeze. But then, I felt something on my line. I reel it in, thinking it's just a big one, you know? But when it breaks the surface, it ain't no fish. It's a hand. A freaking human hand. We're all freaking out, man. Like, what the hell? We didn't sign up for this. So, we call the cops, and they come out, take a look at it. And they're like, yeah, this ain't normal. No kidding, Sherlock. Next thing we know, the whole place is swarming with cops. They're combing the area, asking us questions, the whole 9 yards. Turns out, that hand ain't been in the water long. It's fresh. Real fresh. So now, we're thinking, what else is in this lake? Bodies? God knows what else. And that's when things start getting real tense, you know? Like, we can't just chill anymore. We're on edge, wondering if we're gonna find more body parts or worse. They decide to drain the lake, like, the whole damn thing. And let me tell you, that ain't no small task. It takes days. Days of watching the water level drop, knowing there's something sinister lurking beneath the surface. And sure enough, as the water recedes, they start finding bodies. Not just one or two, but a bunch of them. Some fresh, some not so much. It's like a freaking graveyard down there. Meanwhile, we're holed up in the cabin, freaking out. Like, what if whoever did this is still out there? What if they come for us next? We're sitting ducks, man. But finally, they catch the guy. Turns out, he's been living out in the woods, just off the grid. A real creepy dude, you know? And he's been dumping bodies in the lake for God knows how long. So they haul him off to jail, and we can finally breathe easy. But let me tell you, that weekend, it ain't one we're gonna forget anytime soon. And I don't think any of us will be going back to that lake anytime soon. I decided to take a break from the craziness of everyday life and signed up for this digital detox retreat in the mountains. You know, just to get away from it all, clear my head, all that stuff. The cabin they put us in was pretty remote, deep in the woods, no cell service, no Wi-Fi, the whole deal. But here's the thing, I kinda cheated. I brought along a second phone, just in case. I know. Defeats the purpose of a digital detox, right? But I couldn't help it. I needed to stay connected, even if it was just with a select few friends. So, the first few days were pretty chill. I'm talking nature walks, yoga sessions, meditation, all that good stuff. It felt nice to unplug, you know? But then things started getting weird. I'm sitting on the porch one evening, just enjoying the view, when I get this text on my secret phone. It's from an unknown number, and it says something like, "I see you." I brush it off at first, thinking it's just some prank or something. But then the messages keep coming, and they're getting creepier by the minute. Like, they know stuff about me that nobody should know. Stuff that I never posted online or told anyone about. It's like they're watching me, spying on me, and it's freaking me out big time. I try to ignore it, pretend like it's not happening. But it's like this person is always there, lurking in the shadows. Every time I look over my shoulder, I half expect to see someone standing there, watching me. I start to feel paranoid, like I'm constantly being watched. I can't relax, can't enjoy the peace and quiet of the mountains. It's like this dark cloud hanging over me, following me wherever I go. And then one night, things take a turn for the worse. I'm lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I hear something outside. It's like footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching on the gravel outside the cabin. My heart starts pounding in my chest as I lay there, frozen in fear. I want to scream, to run, but I'm paralyzed with terror. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the footsteps fade away into the night. I don't sleep a wink that night. I'm too scared, too on edge. I keep thinking about those messages, about whoever's out there watching me. Are they just messing with me, or are they actually planning to do me harm? The next morning, I'm a wreck. I tell the retreat organizers about the messages, about the footsteps outside my cabin. They're concerned, of course, but they don't seem to take it as seriously as I do. They tell me it's probably just my imagination, that I'm letting the stress get to me. But I know what I saw, what I heard. And I know that I'm not safe here, not with whoever's out there lurking in the shadows. I decide to leave, to get out of there before things escalate any further. I pack my bags, say my goodbyes, and hit the road. But even as I drive away, I can't shake the feeling that someone's still watching me, still following me. I make it back home in one piece, thankfully. But the fear, the paranoia, it stays with me. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every little sound. I can't relax, can't let my guard down, not until I know for sure that whoever was watching me is gone for good. So, me and my new wife decided to spend our honeymoon at this cabin up in the Colorado Rockies. We were both pretty excited, you know? Just married, beautiful scenery, the whole 9 yards. The cabin was secluded, like really secluded. It was tucked away in the woods, surrounded by trees for miles. But it was cozy, quaint, just what we were looking for. First few days were great, man. We're exploring the area, hiking, taking in the breathtaking views. But then, one day, my wife stumbles upon this hidden compartment in the floorboards. And inside, she finds these old journals. At first, we're curious, you know? Like, who would hide journals in the floorboards of a cabin? But then we start reading them, and that's when things start getting real creepy. Turns out, the journals belonged to the previous owner of the cabin, some guy named Henry. And as we flip through the pages, we uncover this dark history of murder and betrayal. Henry was a recluse, a hermit who lived out in the woods all alone. But he wasn't always like that. He used to be married, had a wife and kids. But then one day, they all disappeared, vanished without a trace. At first, people thought they just up and left, you know? But then, bodies started turning up in the woods. Women, children, all brutally murdered. And the prime suspect? None other than Henry himself. But here's the kicker, man. Henry was never caught. He disappeared into the woods, vanished without a trace, just like his family before him. As we read through the journals, we start to feel this sense of dread, like we're being watched, like Henry's still out there somewhere, lurking in the shadows. And then, one night, things take a turn for the worse. We're sitting by the fire, just enjoying each other's company, when we hear this noise outside. It's like footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching on the gravel. My wife starts freaking out, man. She's like, "What was that? Did you hear that?" And I'm trying to calm her down, telling her it's probably just an animal or something. But then, we hear it again. Closer this time. And that's when I see him. Henry, standing outside the cabin, staring at us with his cold, dead eyes. I don't know how he found us, how he tracked us down to this remote cabin in the woods. But there he was, just staring at us, like he's been waiting for this moment for years. My wife's hysterical at this point, screaming for me to call the cops, to do something. But I can't move, can't even think straight. I'm frozen in fear, like a deer in headlights. But then, just as suddenly as he appeared, Henry's gone. Disappeared into the darkness, leaving us alone in the cabin, shaking with fear. We don't waste any time, man. We grab our stuff, get the hell out of there as fast as we can. We don't look back, don't stop until we're miles away from that cabin, from Henry and his dark past. So, I'm a search and rescue volunteer, right? It's what I do, helping people out in the wilderness, making sure they get home safe. But this one time, man, it was something else. We get this distress call from a stranded hiker up in the mountains. It's late, pitch dark, but we don't hesitate. We grab our gear, hop in the truck, and head out to find this guy. The coordinates lead us to this remote cabin deep in the woods. It's creepy, man, like something out of a horror movie. But we press on, calling out for the hiker, trying to locate him. And then we find him. Or what's left of him, anyway. He's lying on the ground, blood everywhere, barely conscious. It's bad, real bad. We try to stabilize him, call for backup, but it's too late. He's gone. But here's the thing, man. The distress call? It was a trap. set by some deranged killer who's been preying on unsuspecting victims for God knows how long. We realize it too late, of course. By then, we're already inside the cabin, searching for any sign of the hiker. And that's when we find them. The bodies. Dozens of them, stacked up like cordwood in the basement. We're freaking out, man. Like, how did we not see this coming? How did we walk right into his trap without even realizing it? But there's no time to dwell on it. We gotta get out of there, call for backup, before this psycho comes back for us. But he's already there, waiting for us in the shadows. We see him, just for a second, before he disappears into the darkness. And then it's a game of cat and mouse, man, as we try to make our way out of the cabin, back to safety. But he's always one step ahead of us, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. We can hear him, laughing, taunting us as we stumble through the dark, trying to find a way out. It's like a nightmare, man, like something out of a horror movie. But we can't give up, can't let this guy win. We gotta keep moving, keep fighting, until we make it out of there alive. And finally, after what feels like hours, we see the lights of the rescue team up ahead. We run towards them, screaming for help, as the killer closes in behind us. But we make it, man. We make it out alive, barely. And as we're airlifted out of there, I can't help but think about all those poor souls who weren't so lucky, who never made it out of that cabin alive. So, I'm into yoga, right? It's my thing, helps me relax, clear my mind, all that good stuff. So when I heard about this retreat at a remote cabin in the wilderness, I was all in. I figured it'd be a great opportunity to connect with nature, meet some like-minded people, you know? The cabin was pretty secluded, deep in the woods, surrounded by nothing but trees for miles. But it had a certain charm to it, rustic and cozy. And the group of yogis I was with seemed cool, friendly, all looking for the same thing, inner peace and relaxation. First few days were great, man. We're doing yoga sessions out in the open, meditating by the river, just soaking in the tranquility of the wilderness. But then, things start to take a dark turn. One of the yogis goes missing. At first, we think maybe she just went for a hike or something, got lost in the woods. But as the hours pass and she still doesn't show up, we start to worry. We form search parties, combing the area, calling out her name. But there's no sign of her, no trace. It's like she just vanished into thin air. And then another yogi goes missing. And another. Pretty soon, we're all on edge, wondering who's gonna be next. That's when the paranoia sets in, man. We start suspecting each other, wondering if one of us is behind the disappearances. But nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to believe that one of their fellow yogis could be capable of something so sinister. But then, we find her body. The first yogi who went missing. She's lying in a clearing, bloodied and lifeless. And that's when it hits us. There's a killer among us. We try to stay calm, to stick together, but it's like a powder keg ready to explode. Tensions are running high, accusations are flying left and right. And then, the killings escalate. One by one, my fellow yogis are picked off, their bodies turning up in the most gruesome ways imaginable. It's like a nightmare come to life, man, and there's no escaping it. We try to barricade ourselves inside the cabin, but it's no use. The killer is always one step ahead of us, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But then, just when it seems like all hope is lost, we manage to overpower the killer. Turns out, it was one of us all along, someone we trusted, someone we thought we knew. We restrain them, call for help, and finally, After what feels like an eternity, the authorities arrive. We're safe, for now at least. But the scars, both physical and emotional, will stay with us forever. So, I'm a writer, you know? And I like my solitude when I'm working on a new novel. That's why I have this secluded cabin out in the woods, away from all the noise and distractions of the city. But this one time, things got real creepy, real fast. I'm out at the cabin, working on my latest manuscript, when I see these two men walking just outside. Now, I'm not used to seeing people out here, so it catches me off guard. At first, I think maybe they're lost or something, so I go out to see if they need help. But as I get closer, I can tell something's off about them. They're giving me this weird vibe, like they're up to no good. But I try to brush it off, be friendly, you know? Maybe they're just passing through, looking for directions or something. So I strike up a conversation, ask them where they're headed. But they're evasive, dodging my questions, like they don't want to be found out. And that's when I start to get really suspicious. What are they doing out here in the middle of nowhere? And why are they acting so shady? But before I can get any answers, one of the men pulls out a knife. And that's when it hits me. They're not here for directions. They're here to do me harm. I try to run, to get back inside the cabin and lock the door, but they're too fast. They grab me, pin me down, and I can feel the cold metal of the knife against my skin. I'm terrified, man, like I've never been before. I don't know what they want from me, but I know it can't be anything good. But then, just as suddenly as it started, it's over. They hear something, maybe a car approaching, and they take off into the woods, leaving me shaken and alone. I don't waste any time, man. I grab my phone, call the cops, tell them what happened. They show up pretty quickly, but by then, the men are long gone. The cops search the area, but they don't find anything. No trace of the men, no clues as to why they were there in the first place. But I can't shake the feeling that they'll be back, that they're still out there, watching, waiting. And I can't help but wonder what would have happened if they had caught me, if I hadn't been able to get away. I try to go back to my writing, to lose myself in my work and forget about what happened. But it's no use. The memory of those two men, their faces twisted with malice, it haunts me day and night. I thought I was safe out here in the woods, away from all the dangers of the city. But now I realize nowhere is truly safe. And I'll never be able to look at this cabin the same way again. Jack inherits a cabin from his late grandfather, who passed away unexpectedly. I never knew my grandpa too well, but the news about the inheritance stirred up mixed emotions in me. The cabin is nestled deep within the woods, surrounded by towering trees and the occasional rustling of leaves. It's a serene and peaceful place, or so it seems at first. Excited to explore my inheritance, I pack my bags and head out to the cabin. The drive there is long, winding roads that seem to disappear into the dense forest. When I finally arrive, the cabin appears just as I remembered from childhood visits, weathered but charming, with a rustic feel that takes me back in time. As I settle in, I can't shake the feeling that something is off about this place. There's a heaviness in the air, a sense of unease that I can't quite put my finger on. Maybe it's just the isolation getting to me, or perhaps there's more to this cabin than meets the eye. One night, as I'm exploring the cabin, I stumble upon a locked door in the basement. My curiosity piqued, I search for the key and finally manage to unlock it. What I find inside sends shivers down my spine. It's a hidden room, filled with old photographs and newspaper clippings detailing a dark family secret. As I sift through the documents, I uncover the truth. My grandfather was involved in some shady dealings, and this cabin was at the center of it all. It turns out that the woods surrounding the cabin hold a dark secret, one that my family has been trying to bury for generations. Terrified and unsure of what to do, I contemplate leaving the cabin and never looking back. But something keeps pulling me back, a nagging feeling that I need to uncover the truth behind my family's past. One evening, as I sit by the fireplace, I hear strange noises coming from outside, footsteps crunching on the forest floor, whispers carried by the wind. I peer out the window but see nothing but darkness. The next day, I decide to venture deeper into the woods in search of answers. As I trudge through the underbrush, I feel as though I'm being watched, as though unseen eyes are tracking my every move. Suddenly, I stumble upon an old, dilapidated shack hidden deep within the forest. It's the same shack I saw in the photographs from the hidden room. Trembling with fear, I cautiously approach and peer inside. What I find inside is beyond anything I could have imagined. It's a makeshift altar, adorned with strange symbols and surrounded by candles. It's clear that this place was used for some kind of ritualistic ceremony, but the details elude me. As I try to piece together the puzzle of my family's past, I hear rustling in the bushes behind me. My heart pounds in my chest as I whirl around to confront whatever lurks in the darkness. To my horror, I come face to face with a group of people wearing masks, the same masks worn by the figures in the old photographs. They surround me, their eyes glinting with malice as they close in. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I turn and run as fast as I can, crashing through the underbrush in a blind panic. I can hear their footsteps behind me, their voices echoing through the trees as they give chase. I don't know how long I run for, but eventually, I stumble upon a clearing and collapse to the ground, gasping for breath. I wait in terror, expecting my pursuers to catch up at any moment. But to my relief, there's nothing but silence. The forest is still and quiet, as though nothing had ever happened. Shaken but alive, I gather my wits and make my way back to the cabin, vowing never to return to this cursed place again. As I drive away from the cabin for the last time, I can't help but wonder what other secrets lie hidden in the depths of those woods, secrets that may be better left undisturbed. Alright, so here's what happened. I'm out in the wilderness, right? Just minding my own business, hiking through the woods, when this violent storm hits out of nowhere. I'm talking thunder, lightning, the whole shebang. I'm scrambling to find shelter, trying to keep myself from getting soaked to the bone. And that's when I see it. This cabin, tucked away in the trees, like it's been waiting for me. I don't waste any time, man. I book it to the cabin, hoping to ride out the storm until it blows over. But when I get inside, things start to get weird. The cabin's decked out like some kind of doomsday bunker, with shelves lined with canned food, water purification tablets, the whole 9 yards. And there's this guy there, the survivalist who owns the place. At first, I'm relieved to see another human being, someone who can help me wait out the storm. But then I start to notice things, little things that don't add up. Like how he's eyeing me up and down, sizing me up like I'm some kind of threat. Or how he keeps his hand close to the gun he's got strapped to his hip. I try to make small talk, you know? Ease the tension, maybe get him to warm up to me. But he's not having it. He's cold, distant, like he's afraid of me or something. And then, things take a turn for the worse. The storm's still raging outside, and the power goes out. Now we're stuck in the dark, just me and this survivalist, alone in the wilderness. I can feel his paranoia getting worse by the minute, like he thinks I'm gonna turn on him or something. And I start to get scared, man, like really scared. But then, just when I think things can't get any worse, I hear something outside. It's like footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching on the gravel. My heart's pounding in my chest as I realize what's happening. Someone else is out there, someone who's not supposed to be there. The survivalist grabs his gun, his hands shaking as he tells me to stay put. But I'm not about to just sit around and wait for whoever's out there to come for us. I follow him outside, creeping through the darkness, trying to stay quiet. And that's when we see them. Two figures, lurking in the shadows, just beyond the edge of the trees. The survivalist raises his gun, ready to defend us against whatever's out there. But before he can take a shot, I realize who they are. It's the rescue team, man. They've been searching for me ever since I went missing in the storm. I can't believe it, man. I'm safe. I'm gonna make it out of this alive. But as I look back at the survivalist, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if they hadn't found us when they did. His paranoia nearly got us both killed, man. And I'll never forget the terror of that night, trapped in the wilderness with a man who saw me as nothing more than a threat. V's been struggling lately with stuff like anger issues and depression. So, my parents decide to send me to this wilderness therapy program, where I gotta spend 6 months living in a remote cabin in the woods. Fun, right? At first, I'm not thrilled about it, you know? I mean, who wants to spend half a year out in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of strangers? But I figure it might do me some good, help me get my head straight. So, I get to the cabin, and it's pretty basic. No electricity, no running water, just me in the wilderness. But I try to make the best of it, you know? I figure maybe it'll give me some time to clear my head, work through my issues. But then, things start to get weird. I'm out in the woods one day, just doing my thing, when I get this feeling like someone's watching me. I brush it off at first, thinking it's just my imagination, but the feeling won't go away. And then, I start seeing him. This man, lurking in the shadows, always just out of sight. I can never get a good look at him, but I know he's there, watching me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I try to tell the counselors about it, but they don't believe me. They say it's just my mind playing tricks on me, that I'm letting my fears get the best of me. But I know what I saw, man. I know he's real, and he's dangerous. I can feel it in my bones. I try to avoid him, stay away from the areas of the woods where I've seen him lurking. But no matter where I go, he's always there, just out of reach. And then, one night, things come to a head. I'm in my cabin, trying to sleep, when I hear something outside. It's like footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching on the gravel. My heart's pounding in my chest as I lay there, frozen in fear. I want to scream, to run, but I'm paralyzed with terror. And then, he's there. Standing in the doorway, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. I can't move, can't even breathe, as he takes a step towards me. But then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he's gone. Disappeared into the night, leaving me shaken and alone. I don't sleep a wink that night, man. I'm too scared, too on edge. I know he'll be back, and next time, he might not leave me alone. I try to tell the counselors again, but they still don't believe me. They say I'm just imagining things, that I need to focus on my therapy and stop letting my fears control me. But I know the truth, man. I know he's out there, waiting for me in the shadows, ready to prey on my vulnerabilities. I spend the rest of my time at the cabin constantly looking over my shoulder, always on edge. And when the 6 months are finally up, I'm relieved to leave that place behind. just doing my usual rounds in this small town, trying to keep the peace. But then, I get this call about a disturbance at a cabin out in the woods. Now, normally, I wouldn't think twice about it. Just another noise complaint or something. But something about this call gives me a bad feeling, you know? But I figure, hey, it's probably nothing. So I head out to the cabin on my own, thinking I can handle whatever's waiting for me. But when I get there, things are already going south. I can hear shouting coming from inside the cabin, and it sounds like things are getting pretty heated. I should have called for backup, man. But I let my pride get the best of me, thinking I can handle it on my own. So I go in, gun drawn, ready for whatever comes my way. But I'm not prepared for what I find inside. There's this guy, big and burly, standing over this woman, shouting at her like he's about to snap. I try to defuse the situation, you know? Talk him down, get him to calm down. But he's not having it. He's got this wild look in his eyes, like he's not all there. And then, he lunges at me, like a wild animal. I barely have time to react before he's on top of me, pinning me to the ground. I'm fighting for my life, man, trying to push him off me, but he's too strong. I can feel his hands around my neck, squeezing the life out of me. I should have called for backup, man. I should have known better. But it's too late now. And then, just when I think I can't hold on any longer, I hear sirens in the distance. Backup's finally arrived, thank God. They burst through the door, guns drawn, and managed to pull the guy off me. But by then, I'm already blacking out. I wake up in the hospital, battered and bruised, but alive. And as I lay there, recovering, I can't help but think about how close I came to losing everything. I should have called for backup, man. I should have known better. But I won't make that mistake again. Not when my life's on the line. So, I'm out in the woods, building this cabin on some land I bought, trying to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It's been a long summer, man. Hot and sweaty work, but I'm making progress, you know? The cabin's starting to take shape, and I'm starting to picture myself living out here, away from all the noise and stress of city life. But then, one day, out of nowhere, these two guys show up. They're rough-looking, dressed in worn-out clothes, like they've been living in the woods their whole lives. At first, I figure they're just passing through, maybe out hunting or something. But then they start telling me that this land belongs to them, that I can't build here. I try to reason with them, you know? Show them the deed to the land, prove that I own it fair and square. But they're not having it. They just keep insisting that this is their land, that I need to pack up and leave. I start to get a bad feeling about it, man. Like maybe these guys aren't as harmless as they seem. But I try to stay calm, keep things from escalating. But then, things take a turn for the worse. The guys start getting aggressive, pushing me around, threatening to tear down the cabin if I don't leave. I'm scared, man. I don't know what they're capable of, but I know I don't want to find out. I try to stand my ground, you know? Tell them I'm not going anywhere, that they'll have to go through me if they want me to leave. But they just laugh, like it's some kind of joke. And that's when I realize how serious they are, how dangerous they could be. I'm outnumbered, man. It's just me against these two guys, and I don't like my odds. But then, just when it seems like things are about to get violent, something strange happens. The guys suddenly go quiet, like they've heard something in the woods. I can't see anything, but I can feel the tension in the air, like something's about to happen. And then, just like that, they're gone. disappeared into the woods without a trace, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a sinking feeling in my gut. I don't waste any time, man. I grab my stuff, pack up the cabin, and get the hell out of there as fast as I can. But as I'm driving away, I can't shake the feeling that I haven't seen the last of those guys, that they'll be back for me one day. I try to put it out of my mind, focus on starting over somewhere new. But no matter where I go, I can't escape the memory of that chilling encounter in the woods. So, I'm out hiking in the woods, just trying to clear my head and enjoy some time in nature. It's peaceful out here, you know? Birds chirping, leaves rustling in the wind, the works. But then, out of nowhere, I hear it. Screaming, coming from somewhere up ahead. At first, I think maybe it's just some kids messing around, but the screams sound wrong somehow. Like whoever's making them is in real trouble. So, I start heading towards the source of the screams, trying to figure out what's going on. And that's when I see it. A cabin tucked away in the trees, with the door wide open. I approach cautiously, not sure what to expect. But as I get closer, I can hear more screaming, coming from inside the cabin. It's chilling, man, like something out of a horror movie. I hesitate for a moment, wondering if I should call for help or just get the hell out of there. But then, something inside me compels me to go inside, to see what's happening. I push open the door, and what I see inside makes my blood run cold. There's a man, standing over a woman, shouting at her, hitting her. It's like something out of a nightmare. I freeze for a moment, not sure what to do. But then, something inside me snaps, and I realize I have to do something to help her. I rush forward, yelling at the man to stop, to leave her alone. But he just turns on me, his eyes wild with rage. I brace myself for a fight, ready to defend myself and the woman. But before things can escalate any further, the woman manages to break free and run out of the cabin. The man turns and follows her, disappearing into the trees. I'm left standing there, shaken and unsure of what to do next. I want to chase after them, make sure the woman's okay. But I know I can't do it alone, not with that man out there somewhere. So, I do the only thing I can think of. I pull out my phone and call the cops, telling them what I saw and where I am. They arrive pretty quickly, and I tell them everything that happened. They take my statement and head off into the woods to search for the man and the woman. I wait anxiously, hoping they'll find them safe and sound. And eventually, they do. They bring the woman back to me, shaken but alive. She thanks me for intervening, for saving her from that man. And as I watch her walk away with the cops, I can't help but feel a sense of relief. I am retired and living out in the woods of Maine, trying to enjoy my golden years in peace and quiet. But then, out of nowhere, this stranger shows up at my doorstep. Claims to be a long-lost relative or something, but I've never heard of him in my life. I'm suspicious right off the bat, you know? I mean, what are the odds of some random guy showing up out here in the middle of nowhere, claiming to be family? But I try to give him the benefit of the doubt, invite him in for a cup of coffee, see what he's all about. And at first, everything seems fine. We chat for a bit, make small talk about the weather and whatnot. But then, things start to get weird. The guy keeps asking me all these personal questions, like he's trying to get inside my head or something. And every time I try to change the subject, he just circles back around to it, like a dog with a bone. I start to get uncomfortable, you know? Like maybe this guy isn't who he says he is, like maybe he's got some ulterior motive for being here. But I try to keep my cool, not let on that I'm onto him. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? But then, one night, things take a turn for the worse. I'm out in the woods, just enjoying the peace and quiet, when I hear something moving in the bushes. At first, I think maybe it's just a deer or something, but then I see him. The stranger, lurking in the shadows, watching me with those cold, dead eyes. I freeze, not sure what to do. But then, before I can react, he lunges at me, knocking me to the ground. I try to fight him off, but he's too strong. He pins me down, his hands around my throat, squeezing the life out of me. I'm struggling to breathe, to break free from his grip, but it's no use. I can feel myself starting to black out, to lose consciousness. But then, just when it seems like all hope is lost, I manage to land a lucky blow, knocking the guy off me long enough for me to scramble to my feet and get away. I run as fast as I can, back to the safety of my cabin, locking the door behind me and praying that he won't follow. And for a while, it seems like maybe I've lost him, that maybe I'll be safe. But then, I hear a knock at the door, slow and deliberate. I know it's him, that he's come back for me. But I'm not going down without a fight. I grab the nearest weapon I can find, a fireplace poker, and brace myself for whatever comes next. But when I open the door, it's not the stranger standing there. It's the cops, responding to a call about a disturbance out in the woods. I try to explain what happened, but they don't believe me. They say there's no evidence of anyone else being out there, that maybe I just imagined the whole thing. I'm Bianca and I am just trying to escape the chaos of city life by moving into this cozy little cabin up in the Colorado Rockies. I figure it'll be peaceful out here, just me and nature. But then, things start to get weird. I notice my neighbor, this reclusive guy who lives in the cabin next door. He's always keeping to himself, never really coming out except to collect his mail or something. At first, I don't think much of it. I mean, everyone's entitled to their privacy, right? But then, I start to notice some strange things. Like how he's always hauling these big bags of something into his cabin. And how I never see any animals around his place, even though we're out in the middle of the woods. I try to brush it off, tell myself I'm just being paranoid. But then, one day, I catch a glimpse inside his cabin when he leaves the door open by accident. And what I see inside, it chills me to the bone, man. It's like something out of a horror movie. There are animals everywhere, stuffed and mounted on the walls like trophies. And not just deer and stuff, but wolves, bears, even a mountain lion. I feel sick to my stomach, like I'm gonna throw up right then and there. But then, I notice something else. Something even more disturbing. There's this smell coming from inside the cabin. It's like rotting flesh, mixed with something metallic, like blood. I try to tell myself it's just my imagination, that I'm overreacting. But deep down, I know something's not right. So, I decide to do a little digging, you know? See if I can find out more about this guy and what he's up to. And what I uncover, it's worse than anything I could have imagined. Turns out, he's got a history of violence, a rap sheet as long as my arm. Assault, robbery, even manslaughter. I'm freaking out, man. I don't know what to do. I mean, this guy's my neighbor, living right next door to me. But then, things take a turn for the worse. I'm out walking one night, trying to clear my head, when I hear something behind me. I turn around, and there he is, my neighbor, standing there in the shadows. His eyes are cold, empty, like he's not all there. I try to play it cool, act like everything's fine. But he's not fooled. He knows I've been snooping around, trying to uncover his secrets. And then, before I can react, he lunges at me, grabbing me by the throat and pinning me against a tree. I'm struggling, fighting for my life, but he's too strong. I can feel the life being squeezed out of me, my vision starting to go black. But then, just when it seems like all hope is lost, I manage to land a lucky blow, knocking him off me long enough for me to break free and run. I don't stop running until I'm back inside my cabin, safe and sound behind locked doors. But even then, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, waiting for his next chance to strike. I try to call the cops, but they don't take me seriously. They say there's not enough evidence to do anything, that maybe I'm just imagining things. But I know what I saw, man. I know that my neighbor's hiding something dark and sinister. So, I do the only thing I can think of. I pack up my stuff and get the hell out of there, leaving that nightmare behind me for good. I don't want to give my name. Let's just call me James. I am just your average outdoorsman, looking to get away from it all with a summer getaway in the Pacific Northwest. But then, things take a turn for the worse. I'm out hiking one day, enjoying the beauty of the forest, when I notice something off in the distance. Smoke, billowing up into the sky like a giant black cloud. At first, I think it's just a small fire, nothing to worry about. But as I keep hiking, the smoke gets thicker and thicker, until I can barely see in front of me. That's when it hits me. This isn't just any fire. It's a forest fire, and it's headed straight for the area where I'm staying. I start to panic, wondering what I should do. Should I try to outrun the fire, or hunker down and wait for it to pass? But before I can make up my mind, I hear footsteps behind me. I turn around and see a group of people, strangers, running towards me, desperation written all over their faces. They're begging me for help, pleading with me to let them take shelter in my cabin until the fire passes. And I want to help them, I really do. But I'm not sure if my cabin can withstand the flames, or if there's enough room for all of us. But then, I think about what I would want someone to do if I were in their shoes. So, I agree to let them take shelter in my cabin, hoping against hope that we'll all make it out alive. We rush back to the cabin, the fire hot on our heels. I can feel the heat on my skin, smell the smoke in the air. It's like something out of a nightmare. But we make it to the cabin just in time, slamming the door shut behind us and barricading it as best we can. Inside, it's chaos. People are screaming and crying, trying to comfort each other as the flames rage outside. I try to stay calm, to come up with a plan for how we're going to survive this. But it's hard, man. It feels like the walls are closing in on us, like there's no way out. But then, just when it seems like all hope is lost, I remember something. There's a cellar beneath the cabin, a place we can go to escape the flames. We rush down into the cellar, locking the door behind us and huddling together in the darkness as the fire rages on above us. And then, we wait. Hours pass, maybe even days. It's hard to tell in the darkness. But eventually, the flames die down, and we emerge from the cellar, blinking in the sunlight and breathing in the fresh air. We made it, man. Against all odds, we survived. And as we stand there, looking out at the charred landscape around us, I can't help but feel grateful to be alive.